Throughout human history, we've always pushed ourselves to build bigger and higher, from the Biblical Towers of Babel to the Great Pyramids of the ancient Egyptians. As technology has evolved with new building techniques and raw materials, over time we've increasingly pushed the limits of what's possible. Join me for today's video, because we're going to take a look at 15 of the tallest buildings throughout human history. Number 15. St. Paul's Cathedral, 1240 to 1311, 149 meters. St. Paul's Cathedral in the British capital of London was originally built over a 200-year period between 1087 and 1314. Officially dedicated to the Christian St. Paul, it's believed to have been the fourth church built in the area, and as you'll soon see, it wasn't the last. The cathedral has a history that was forged in fire. Work on the first St. Paul's Cathedral began after a fire destroyed the previous building, and the construction was delayed by another fire in the 12th century. It was first consecrated in 1240 AD, but work continued until its eventual completion in 1314. By that point, it was one of the longest churches in the world, as well as being one of the churches with the tallest spire. I'm going to be talking about spires in another of our videos, so keep your eyes peeled for that one if you haven't seen it already. Unfortunately, by the time that construction was complete, it was already superseded, as we'll get to in a moment. As if that wasn't bad enough, it went into decline, and its restoration was held back by the English Civil War. Then, while Christopher Wren was working on it, it went up in flames again during the Great Fire of London. It was eventually demolished and replaced with the St. Paul's Cathedral that we see today. Number 14. Lincoln Cathedral, 1311 to 1548, 159.7 meters. Lincoln Cathedral is the building that took over from St. Paul's as the tallest building in the world, and one of the interesting things about this one is that its construction began 15 years earlier than St. Paul's, as far back as 1072 AD. Also called the Ulm Minster, St. Mary's Cathedral, and the Cathedral Church of the Blessed Virgin Mary of Lincoln. It's an English cathedral that's notable for its early Gothic design. It's also well known for the fact that it's massive, and it held the record for the tallest building for over 200 years. It's also interesting because it's the only building on this list that didn't lose its title because another building was completed that was taller than it. Instead, the spire collapsed and was never rebuilt, which is a shame because otherwise it would have retained the title for over 500 years, until around 1880. But even without the spire, this impressive cathedral was still easily big enough to take people's breath away. Today, it's the UK's fourth largest cathedral by floor area, and an iconic example of groundbreaking British architecture. Number 13. St. Mary's Church, 1549 to 1569, 159 meters. Okay, it's time to head away from the United Kingdom and over to Germany to visit St. Mary's Church, which took the overall title after the collapse of the spire at Lincoln Cathedral. This Lutheran church was built around 1300 AD in the north of Germany, and it actually held the title for much longer than this 20-year span suggests. Sort of. The next entry on our list will explain why that is, but until then, let's stick with St. Mary's. Measuring in at 151 meters, it's only a couple of meters shorter than the Lincoln Cathedral was at its tallest, and it certainly did a better job of standing the test of time. But even then, it wasn't without its challenges. The bell tower collapsed and was rebuilt, though it took 100 years or so, and the steeple tower was also blown down in a storm. After it was rebuilt, it was struck by lightning and then burned down. You can still visit the church, but today it's only 104 meters tall, which still isn't bad. It gives a great view over Stralsund if you're brave enough to climb the 166 steps to the top of the bell tower, and you'll also get a great up-close and personal view of the bells themselves. Just be warned that it is a lot of hard work. Number 12. Beauvais Cathedral, 1569 to 1573, 153 meters. Officially called the Cathedral of St. Peter of Beauvais, this Roman Catholic church can be found in the north of France. Even today, it's still a record holder thanks to it being the home of the world's highest Gothic choir. For this 4-year period, the cathedral was the tallest building in the world, but unfortunately collapsed and remained unfinished. After the collapse, the title went back to St. Mary's Church until 1876. If you go and visit the Beauvais Cathedral today, you'll only be able to see the choir and the transept. The good news is that because the cathedral's nave was never built, the construction team never got around to demolishing what remains of an early cathedral from the 10th century. So it's not all doom and gloom because a little bit of history still remains there. If nothing else, this cathedral is worth a visit still because it contains some original stained glass windows that date back as far as the 13th century. There's also a medieval clock that is believed to be the oldest still functioning mechanical clock in the whole of Europe. Number 11. Rouen Cathedral, 1876 to 1880, 151 meters. After the collapse of the Beauvais Cathedral, St. Mary's Church took back its title, and it didn't see any major competition until the construction of the cathedral in Rouen. It's known for its iconic towers, of which it has 3 in as many different styles. It's also of interest because it's another one of those cathedrals that took an impressively long time to reach completion, being built and rebuilt over and over again for more than 800 years. That's one of the reasons why it's home to such a fascinating mixture of architecture. And as if that wasn't enough, it's also known for being the subject of some Monet paintings. It's also the second building on this list where its height led to it being struck by lightning. In this case, it destroyed the original wood and lead spire that led to it being replaced with a new spire made from cast iron. Unfortunately, by the time it was officially completed, there was a new competitor that had taken the title. Rouen Cathedral has a few other claims to fame too, such as the fact that it's the final resting place of 4 of the Dukes of Normandy. And if you're lucky enough to pay the place a visit, you'll also be able to take a look at some of the original stained glass windows that date all the way back to the 1200s. Number 10. Cologne Cathedral, 1880 to 1890, 157.4 meters. Okay, it's time to butcher some pronunciations, this time with the German name for this cathedral, Hohe Domkirche Sankt Petrus. Yep, sorry about that one. This Catholic cathedral was named as a World Heritage Site in the 1990s, and with good reason. 20,000 people visit it every day, making it Germany's most popular landmark, and it's still the tallest twin-spire church in the world, as well as the 3rd tallest overall. You'll perhaps be unsurprised to learn that this thing took hundreds of years to build too. In fact, work started in 1248, but it ground to a halt in the 16th century and didn't restart until halfway through the 19th. It was eventually completed in 1880, adhering to the original construction plan, but it was almost too little too late. It only remained on the number 1 spot for about a decade. But there's still plenty of other cool stuff to take a look at here, such as its black marble high altar, which dates back to 1322. It also houses the Shrine of the 3 Kings, which is said to hold the worldly remains of the biblical 3 wise men. And it's certainly true that when the shrine was opened in the 1800s, a lot of bones and clothes were found inside of it. Number 9. Ulm Minster, 1890 to 1931, 161.5 meters. This is another German church, known locally as the Ulm Minster. Even today, it holds the record as being the world's tallest church, with its steeple towering an incredible 165.5 meters into the air. Stylistically, Ulm Minster blends a few different influences together, bringing with it the Gothic style of the Middle Ages and spanning the centuries up until its completion in 1890. From the top of its spire, you can see the Alps as well as part of Bavaria. Of course, to access that view, you need to undertake a hefty climb, in this case spanning nearly 800 steps to the top of the tower. There's also plenty of unique treasures to see, including medieval sculptures, a 16th century altar, medieval stained glass windows, and an organ that Mozart once played. Given that the Münster is located in Germany, you might not be surprised to hear that it was affected by the Second World War. But given its religious significance, perhaps it's a sign from above that we can still visit it. Just before Christmas in 1944, an air raid hit the city and wiped out almost everything except for the church. Number 8. Empire State Building, 1931 to 1970, 380 meters. Okay, we've finally reached the modern era, and as you might have noticed, that this is the first building on our list that isn't a place of worship. Coincidence? Probably not. Built in Midtown Manhattan and spanning over 100 floors, the Empire State Building is an iconic part of the New York City skyline, with an impressive height of over 380 meters. Or 443 if you count its spire and antenna. Completed nearly 10 years before the outbreak of the Second World War, it remained the world's tallest building until its title was taken over by another New York legend, the World Trade Center in 1970. Today, it's only the 7th tallest building in New York City, which just goes to show how the city has continued to grow skywards. It's also worth noting that it went up impressively quickly too, with construction starting in March in 1930 and the building officially opening the following May. Of course, it's also an iconic building with a stunning Art Deco design that ensures it's recognized by people from all over the world. That's also one of the reasons why it's a popular tourist attraction, with 4 million people paying a visit every year. The American Society of Civil Engineers named it as one of the 7 wonders of the modern world. Number 7. Willis Tower, 1974 to 1998, 442 meters. We mentioned in our last entry that the Empire State Building lost its title to the World Trade Center in 1970. Unfortunately for New Yorkers, it would only retain the title for another 4 years until construction was completed on the Willis Tower, which used to be called the Sears Tower. Located in Chicago, the Willis Tower has 108 stories and was the tallest building in the world until the late 90s, as well as the tallest in the Western Hemisphere until as recently as 2013. It also had the highest floor that was in occupation until earlier this year. The Willis Tower's observation deck is the highest of its kind in the United States, which is one of the reasons why over 1 million people visit it every year. Perhaps appropriately, it also houses United Airlines, although it's not quite so tall that they can reach out and touch their planes from its windows. As you'd probably expect from such an iconic landmark, the Willis Tower is easily recognizable, though it's perhaps not quite as recognizable as the Empire State Building. And even though the name changed, most of the locals still call it the Sears Tower, showing just how much recognition the tower has earned in public perception. Number 6. Petrus Tower 1 and 2, 1998 to 2004, 451.9 meters. Alright, these two towers are 88 floors high and stretch nearly half a kilometer into the sky, earning themselves the accolade of the world's tallest twin skyscrapers even before the tragic events of September 11, 2001. Located in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia, these epic towers were what held the title as we entered the new millennium. As you can imagine, you can see them from pretty much anywhere in the sprawling city, and they're a popular destination for tourists and sightseers. Does the name Felix Baumgartner sound familiar? Well, he's the guy who set the new record by jumping to Earth from a helium balloon in the stratosphere in partnership with Red Bull. He did that in 2012, but 13 years earlier, in April of 1999, he set another record for base jumping from a window cleaning crane at the Petrus Towers. French climber Alain Robert, who's nicknamed Spider-Man, climbed to the top of Tower 2 using no safety equipment. One of the most iconic features of the Petrus Towers is the sky bridge that connects the two towers, spanning both the 41st and 42nd floors. It's the highest two-story bridge in the world and weighs an incredible 750 tons. It's open to around 1,000 visitors per day, offering some truly incredible views of the city. Number 5. Suzhou Zhongnan Center, in construction, 499.2 meters. We finally reached the first of the buildings on our list that are still under construction. So if you try to pay this one a visit, then you're just going to find a building site, although it's admittedly near to the finish line and was initially due for completion last year. That's been now moved to 2025. It was also supposed to be much taller, stretching to a height of about 729 meters, but that had to be scaled back after the Chinese government instituted a ban on buildings taller than 500 meters. If they'd gone ahead with their plans, the tower would now be finished and would stand as the second tallest building in the world. Typical for a building of this size and scope, the center is due to support a variety of different businesses, from shopping malls and restaurants to offices, apartments, and hotels. The top floor was also due to house an observatory, but it's unclear as to whether that will still happen with the scaled-back design. Unfortunately, the changing Chinese legislation isn't the only thing that's held this project back. It's also faced more than its fair share of money troubles and cutbacks, all of which combine to mean that a lot of people will be relieved when it finally comes to fruition and opens to the public. Number 4. Taipei 101, 2004 to 2009, 508 meters. Taipei 101 was originally called the Taipei World Financial Center, and it's a huge Taiwanese skyscraper that was the first building in the world to reach a height of half a kilometer. It was also the world's tallest building, but only for 5 years. You'll notice from the ever-decreasing timescales here that new records are being set all the time, and it seems as though as soon as one building takes the top spot, construction begins on another one which aims to take the title. Still, there are a lot of cool things to talk about with this one, such as the fact that their elevators travel at over 60 kilometers per hour and can take people from the 5th floor to the 89th floor in just 37 seconds. We're talking about an elevator ride that's so fast that it might leave you feeling a little travel sick. Taipei 101 also features a unique design that's supposed to help it to withstand the earthquakes and storms that the region is known for. Given that it first opened in 2004 and is still standing strong, I'd say they did a pretty good job of that. Number 3. Goldin Finance 117, in construction, 596.5 meters. Our second entry on this list is still under construction and is interesting for a few different reasons. One of them is that it breaks the 500-meter barrier despite the fact that the Chinese law no longer allows the construction of buildings this tall. It got away with that because construction began way back in 2008 and it reached its present height in 2015. Unfortunately, it's also been plagued with difficulties, and construction of the building has ground to a stop on 2 different occasions. Part of that was because of the Great Recession, although it's unclear as to why it was never finished after the construction began again in 2011. The company that's behind its development now has taken all of the workers away and just sort of left it. The building itself was specifically designed to look like a walking stick, and the goal was for it to be the tallest building with a flat roof. The plan was for it to be at the center of a larger development that would house high-end living spaces, entertainment venues, parks, and shopping centers, but it remains to be seen whether the development will ever come to fruition. Number 2. Burj Khalifa, 2009 to present, 828 meters. The Burj Khalifa is the building that people would think of when asked to identify the tallest building throughout history, in part because it's the current world record holder. This Dubai-based skyscraper stretches over a half a mile into the sky and towers over its rivals in a city that's already known for having tall buildings. One of the most impressive things about the Burj Khalifa is that it was built in just 5 years, with construction starting at approximately the same time as the Taipei 101 opened. Some of the steel for it was taken from the Palace of the Republic in East Berlin. It's also notable for serving a political purpose. The government of the UAE wanted to reduce its reliance on oil, in part because oil will inevitably run out. They also wanted the UAE to gain recognition on a global scale. The building itself was designed by the company that designed the Willis Tower, and the design was inspired by Islamic architecture. Like Taipei 101, it also had to be designed to withstand extreme weather events, in this case the hot summers that Dubai is known for. Without that, there would have been a real risk that the world's tallest building would have ended up melting. Number 1. Jeddah Tower, in construction, 1,000 meters. By now, it should be no surprise that there's another contender on the block for the title of the world's tallest building. And we can safely say that by the time that this one is completed, someone will already be trying to build something bigger. It always seems to happen that way. Based in the city of Jeddah in Saudi Arabia, the Jeddah Tower was originally called the Kingdom Tower and aims to be the first building in the world to break the 1-kilometer mark. It's also due to be the centerpiece of a new development called the Jeddah Economic City. Unfortunately, and perhaps predictably, it ran into difficulties during the construction, and the project is currently on hold, as it has been for the last 4 years. We're yet to see whether it will ever get completed. Still, there's really nothing out there that can compete with the scope and ambition of this project. And if it ever reaches completion, then it will set a new benchmark for human construction, and likely spark an arms race as other countries try to follow in its footsteps. Oh, and did I mention that you could also fit 7 St. Paul's cathedrals stacked on top of each other in the airspace that this thing will take up? No? Well, yeah, it does that too. Watch our binge-watching playlist if you'd like to watch all of our most popular top 15 videos. Grab a drink, grab a snack, and get ready to binge.